One of the biggest complaints Republicans have had over the impeachment inquiry is the secrecy. Because most of them do not sit on these committees, they are not allowed to sit in on these interviews with potential witnesses. There's a concern and criticism that only select information is being released to make President Trump look bad. Well, a couple things have happened, and the big breaking news is that Republicans, led by Matt Gaetz, have quite literally stormed a secure impeachment inquiry, a secure facility, sparking outrage among the left, arguing that by bringing in their electronics, they're compromising national security, that they're violating rules. It's a big publicity stunt, while others argue that Donald Trump should have a right to confront his accusers, call their own witnesses, and that this is all unjust. The whole thing's particularly complicated. We have a bunch of statements from many of the Republicans involved and journalists, and some are arguing they do have jurisdiction over these witnesses, countering claims by Democrats they don't. At the same time, Lindsey Graham is set to introduce a resolution condemning the impeachment inquiry, saying it should be dismissed in the Senate without trial. Okay, there's a lot going on here, and this is breaking. So let's get started with the first story. Republicans storm closed impeachment proceeding. But before we get started, head over to timcast.com/donate if you would like to support my work. There are several different options you can choose from. Also, make sure to check out the Tim Pool Daily Show podcast on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, etc. You'll get this segment as well as a full hour and a half, usually, of content every day at 6:30 p.m. And it is it's a safer place for me to talk about politics. So if you subscribe to my podcast there, you have there's less to worry about in terms of censorship, but also just share this video if you want to support my work because it helps me grow the channels. From the Daily Caller, House Republicans briefly shut down a closed-door meeting Wednesday by storming the room where lawmakers were questioning a Defense Department official involving the impeachment inquiry into President Donald Trump. Over a dozen Republican lawmakers gathered outside of a private meeting room Wednesday and told reporters that they would try to enter the closed-door deposition regarding the official impeachment inquiry into Trump. The House Intelligence, Foreign Affairs, and Oversight Committees are leading these proceedings after allegations that Trump asked Ukrainian officials to investigate former Vice President Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden. Quote, "We're going to go see if we can get inside," Republican Florida Rep Matt Gaetz told reporters, according to a video posted on Twitter. The incident caused a delay in proceedings. Democratic Virginia Rep Gary Connolly said, according to Rachel Bade, a Congress reporter for the Washington Post. The Democrats were consulting Sergeant at Arms, she tweeted. Defense Department official Laura Cooper was testifying about allegations that the U.S. withheld military aid from Ukraine as Trump was allegedly trying to get officials to look into Biden. Now, this is all coming after the Bill Taylor testimony, where it's being reported that, once again, the walls are closing in on Trump. Bill Taylor essentially testifying there was quid pro quo, and they wanted the Ukrainian president to explicitly announce an investigation into Biden, which makes it sound political. Before we get into more of the breaking news, I just want to make one point here. Look, you've got one guy so far saying quid pro quo. You've got Mick Mulvaney trying to backtrack after saying that it was kind of quid pro quo. He didn't say quid pro quo, essentially. But the issue here is you have many more denials. I'm not here to pass judgment. I'm just letting you know. You're going to hear from the left, this proves it. Well, hold on. This is one yes in a sea of no's. You've got a bunch of witnesses saying no quid pro quo, one witness saying there was. I don't see that personally as enough to go on so far, but hey, we're investigating. We'll see what happens. Let's get back to the breaking news. We can see here, Scott Thuman tweeted, "Here's the video of when 24 GOP members led by Matt Gaetz entered the secure hearing room, the SCIF, to interrupt witness testimony in the impeachment inquiry as they demand access despite not being committee members. They're complaining it's a Soviet-style process." Now, this tweet in particular is interesting. Many people have claimed they're not committee members, so they're not allowed in. However, there is a tweet from Rep Bradley Byrne, and this is where things start getting intense, because apparently Byrne was screaming in Schiff's face. But this is what we have so far. I believe it may have been Byrne, maybe it's somebody else, but let's go through it. He says, "Adam Schiff just shut down his secret underground impeachment hearing after I led a group of Republicans into the room. Now he's threatening me with an ethics complaint. I'm on the Armed Services Committee, but being blocked from the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense's testimony. This is a sham." In the video, he says, "We actually have jurisdiction over this particular interview." I don't know exactly what he's trying to say because he's not on the committee, But I think he's saying if the interview is going to involve somebody in which he does have jurisdiction, he should be allowed in, but was blocked. This is all contentious because the left is saying they shouldn't be allowed in. He's saying he should be. And this is where things just get really, really weird. Check this out. This thread from a congressional correspondent from CNN, where he initially talks about how they're coming in. They entered the room with their electronics, Connolly said, which is prohibited in the room. Mike Conaway of Texas collected the electronics. Check this out. More details. Byrne was yelling in Schiff's face. Rep Val Demings shouted back as both Byrne and Louis Gohmert, who were yelling about the process. It was closest thing I've seen around here to mass civil unrest as a member of Congress, sources told me. This is alarming. I think this is actually pretty scary. To hear that members of Congress just stormed into this room and they were screaming matches. I don't care what side you're on, okay? Politics is downstream from culture. The street fights we've seen in the cultural battle, the culture war, it's now, coming to a point where Congress is screaming in each other's face. They're arguing over who has jurisdiction, and confidence is starting to get. Well, there's a loss of confidence now in what's happening in these actual hearings. The left is absolutely going to defend themselves and say Trump must be removed, and the right's going to reject it. Well, there's more here. Let's go back to the Daily Caller story and just get more. They've got photos and videos. They say multiple Republicans have tried to access the depositions and get transcripts of the meetings in the past, the Washington Times reported. One Republican said that the group got in Wednesday, but were asked to leave. Olivia Beavers, a Congress reporter for The Hill, tweeted. So they go through all this stuff. I want to show you some of the statements now from some other reps. Rep Mark Walker tweeted, "We are in the SCIF and every GOP member is quietly listening." Meanwhile, Adam Schiff, clearly peeved that he will no longer be able to hide his impeachment sham, is threatening ethics punishment for all of us. His fake intimidation can't hide his lies, open the process, saying that these updates are coming from outside the room. Notably, they're saying this because people are concerned they may have just compromised national security. We have this tweet. So they're the same tweets. To show you some criticism before we get into the bigger context here. Mike Ioyang says in a series of tweets that as somebody, she's with Third Way National Security, that essentially many people, many foreign actors are trying to figure out what's going on in these hearings. And by bringing in your phones, it could potentially compromise how these rooms function. And that's one of the big criticisms coming from the left as to why they shouldn't have done this. But in the end, I think none of that matters. The right and the left are at complete odds over what's going on and what is the right thing to do. Of course, it's going to break down on tribal lines. Now, this is all happening in the backdrop of Lindsey Graham introducing a resolution condemning House impeachment. This is from yesterday night. They say, Senator Lindsey Graham is planning to introduce a resolution condemning the House Democrats' impeachment inquiry process and argue that any articles should be dismissed in the Senate without trial. Quote, "This resolution puts the Senate on record condemning the House. Here's the point of the resolution. Any impeachment vote based on this process to me is illegitimate, is unconstitutional, and should be dismissed in the Senate without a trial," Graham told Fox News' Sean Hannity. President Trump and his GOP allies on Capitol Hill have lashed out at how House Democrats are handling the impeachment inquiry, arguing they should hold a vote to formally launch the investigation. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has argued the rules don't require a vote, but Republicans say it would give them more leeway to call their own witnesses and put swing state Democrats on the record on launching the impeachment inquiry. Graham added on Tuesday night that Trump should get, quote, "the same rights that any American has if you're giving a parking ticket to confront the witnesses against you can't be based on hearsay. We cannot allow future presidents and this president to be impeached based on an inquiry in the House that's never been voted upon, that does not allow the president to confront the witnesses against him, to call witnesses on his behalf, and cross-examine people who are accusing him of misdeeds," he added. The House is holding near daily closed-door depositions with current and former administration officials as part of their inquiry focused on Trump asking Ukraine to investigate the Bidens and whether he held up aid to try and pressure the country. The inquiry is being overseen by the House Intelligence, Foreign Affairs, and Oversight and Reform Committees. Now, all of this seems to make no sense to me. Listen, I understand right now we have Bill Taylor saying there was quid pro quo. They're calling him a Boy Scout, saying he is much more honorable, has more integrity than all of the other officials who've denied it. I'm not going to play games about credibility. We've got multiple witnesses saying there was no quid pro quo, and we have Bill Taylor saying there was. Mick Mulvaney essentially saying that there was, but then backtracking. Here's the point. The official reporting from the New York Times is that Ukraine did not know anything was being held up, that they did not know there was quid pro quo. That's from the New York Times. So who am I supposed to believe? A multitude of sources saying nothing here, no quid pro quo, and Ukraine didn't even know aid was being held up, or the one witness who says that it was. The argument from the left is he's the one person being honest. Well, is Ukraine lying as well? Because you had testimony that Ukraine was completely unaware of any aid being held up. How can there be quid pro quo if the other country doesn't realize they have to do something to gain something? It doesn't seem to make sense. But I will stress the partisan nature of all of this. You give them one yes, and it's affirmative, period. So reading more, they say, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell sidestepped when asked about how long a potential Senate trial would last, telling reporters during a weekly press conference that, quote, there are all kinds of potentials and we don't have it yet. Graham's plan for a resolution comes after he said earlier this month that he was going to send a letter to Pelosi warning that Senate Republicans wouldn't remove Trump from office over the Ukraine phone call. But the plan got pushed back from some of Graham's GOP colleagues during a closed-door lunch last week. Graham appeared to signal on Tuesday night that he had changed his mind about the letter. It's going to be a resolution, Graham said when Hannity mentioned the letter. I hope to have a vote on it. It would be great to have 100. Here's the thing. I do not believe there is enough grounds right now for impeachment of Donald Trump. That's my personal opinion. Hey, not a lawyer, not an expert, just somebody who reads the news. I can be wrong, and I think I'm allowed to be wrong. I'm wrong a lot, okay? Let's be real. But I believe personally that the reason they're doing this is based off of negative partisanship. And I believe this because of a conversation I had with podcaster Sam Cedar, where we talked about the political ramifications of impeachment. Now, Sam's position was firm. I'm not trying to misattribute what he was saying. He says he thinks that Trump has violated his oath of office. Essentially, I'm trying to avoid putting words in his mouth, but that we need to hold Trump accountable for what he was doing. It was extortion and things of that nature. From there, though, a big political defense was that negative partisanship drives voter turnout. So what's the point of all of this? Voter turnout. Moody's Analytics, as I've pointed out in the past couple of videos, shows a clear Trump victory in all three of their scenarios. And they have only missed one prediction, and it was Trump's election in 2016. They believe they have adapted their model, and now they believe Trump will win. But there is a path to victory for Democrats, and it's with historical voter turnout. According to the conversation I had with Sam, which I then researched, negative partisanship does drive voter turnout. He's absolutely correct. So I think it's a big strategy. We've seen the memo from Democrats talking about how they got to get House Democrats, the moderates, to push impeachment because it will drive voter turnout. It will get them those votes. In which case, what we're seeing is this action, in my opinion, again, just in my opinion, is not about whether or not Trump did anything wrong. It's about the fact that analytics, the data shows Trump is going to win because the economy is great and he's addressing issues at least enough Americans care about to vote for him. In which case, if you can't campaign on policy, you have to campaign on negative partisanship. Convince Democrats that the other is evil and that Trump is a bad man. In order to do that, you need select testimony, and you need testimony like Bill Taylor saying, essentially, that there was quid pro quo. It doesn't matter if every witness comes out and says there wasn't. It just matters you get that one statement, because this will be run in campaign ads. Democrats are going to say, listen, an honorable individual and our ambassador said this was true. And that's all they need to drive negative partisanship. Now, I will absolutely come back to this point where Vanity Fair says the walls are closing in. Bill Taylor's testimony put Trump's impeachment in overdrive. I'm sorry. I understand that you think the walls are closing in, but the walls have been closing in for a really, really long time. It must be a very, very large room that Trump is in, because the walls have been closing in since the beginning of his presidency. They said it over and over and over again in the press. I don't think so. The Senate, the Republicans control the Senate. They are not going to remove Trump, whether some of them like him or not. Apparently, there are a lot of Republicans. Democrats believe there are many Republicans who secretly dislike Trump and are not going to back him if given the choice. However, because they have to publicly vote, they're going to vote to defend Trump. Otherwise, they won't get reelected. I'm not making that argument. That's the criticism. But in the end, I don't care what your opinion is on who likes Trump and who doesn't. They control the Senate. Lindsey Graham is denouncing the impeachment inquiry. The House Republicans are storming the rooms. And it's just completely unlikely this will end up as anything in the Senate. Trump is going to walk away from this. That's why, again, I don't think the goal is impeachment. I don't think the goal is to stop high crimes and misdemeanors. I think they literally just need dirt. They're compelling witnesses to testify so they can get the smears prepared for 2020 to drive historical voter turnout. Again, you can have Sondland say no quid pro quo. You can have Trump say it. You can have Ukraine say there was no quid pro quo, and the New York Times report they were unaware of any aid being held up. But that one interview with Bill Taylor is all they needed. They were digging, they found what they needed, and that's what they will use. Think about it. Knowing the Republicans control the Senate, do you think the Democrats are betting on actually getting Trump impeached, actually convicting him? Of course not. Okay, impeach. Let me clarify. The Democrats control the House. They can impeach Trump. But will he be convicted? Will anything come of this? No, nothing will happen. Trump is projected to win, period. What will happen, though, is out of the 10 interviews they do, today, they find one where they can say something bad about Trump and use that in every campaign ad possible for moderates and to weaponize, rhetoric coming into 2020. There are a few things that I do want to point out. This may be... So already we're seeing the GOP push back on Bill Taylor's testimony. And this is one of the biggest pieces of criticism the right has had about the secrecy of the impeachment hearings, in that only select information is being released. And check this out. They say McCarthy claimed those reports are based on leaks coming from the committee chairman, Adam Schiff, and do not reflect Ratcliffe's efforts to disprove Taylor's testimony. The reason the Republicans are so furious about secrecy is they believe you have one guy who says something, they leak it, and they ignore all the contradictory evidence. Again, it is about weaponizing the rhetoric and not allowing anyone in to see what's going on. I will state, you have Rep Byrne saying he does have jurisdiction, the left saying no, he doesn't, and ultimately, I don't know where we end up. But I'll tell you this. Here's what really scares me, okay? With Republicans storming into this building. There's going to be a ton of Republicans who are saying, finally, they grew a spine and did something. And I got to admit, I'm kind of in that position. When I saw this video, I can't remember who it was. It was a Republican saying, I have been denied entry to see what's going on in this impeachment inquiry. It's a sham, blah, blah, blah. I saw that and I said, just go in. That was my personal feeling. That, dude, just go in. No one's going to stop me, okay? You want to arrest me? Fine. If you are doing something that I feel violates the Constitution, I'm going to walk in that room. But they didn't. And so I was like, well, you know what? If they're not willing to do it, then nothing's going to change. Matt Gaetz was. Matt Gaetz led that charge with about a dozen Republicans. And, they say stormed, but they did. They went in without authorization, past the guards. It wasn't like they were charging in and knocking things over. No. They walked in, opened the door. They had their phones. Some were filming. And I'll admit, I can respect the gall it takes to go in and do this. However, hearing then that you get congressmen screaming in Schiff's face shows me that we're in dangerous territory. Look at some of these other countries in Europe when their parliament and their Congress, mostly parliaments, start getting into fights. Bad things happen, and we're in a dangerous track. The divide in this country is getting so intense that Republicans were being denied entry into this impeachment inquiry. I think that's wrong. Completely wrong. I think we as Americans have a right to know what these people are saying, and I am not going to wait for you to release these documents. I am for transparency. Same is true for Trump. Same is true for Schiff. And I've always been very much about transparency in core issues of public matter. Now, I understand there's confidentiality and there's complicated issues, but this is an impeachment inquiry into the president. It's serious. And I agree, Trump should have a right to confront his accusers. The whistleblower's gone, apparently. So what is the impeachment inquiry about at this point? I have no idea. But I think we're entering dangerous territory. The Democrats know their power is limited. They're probably going to lose because their policies are unpopular. The economy is great. And instead of saying we have to work harder to win some hearts and minds for 2020 and 2024, what do? Negative partisanship. It is dangerous. It's going to escalate. And I'm already worried by what we're seeing. I'll leave it there. Thanks for hanging out. Let me know what you think in the comments below. We'll keep the conversation going. As I said earlier, if you've made it this far, check out the podcast, Tim Pool Daily Show, on all podcast platforms. I'm really going to try to push that as hard as possible because YouTube is getting scary with all the news that's been coming out, derankings, demonetization, etc. The podcast is one place where, at least for now, you can subscribe and get my full hour and a half of content every single day. Next segment will be youtube.com/TimCastNews at 6 p.m. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all there.